If you are using the Divi Menu module and your navigation has multiple levels, you may be looking for a way to modify the appearance of the submenus, the drop-down menu items. In this video, you'll find a detailed walkthrough on how to customize Divi submenus with CSS, how to change the width, the position, the font styling, and even how to add hover effects and a little triangle arrow. It's all here. Hi, my name is Ania and my goal here is to help you build beautiful websites. And website navigation is one of the most important parts, right? That is why in this step-by-step walkthrough, I will show you how to modify the appearance of the submenus inside the Divi Menu module. So if you are using the Divi Builder for your header and not the default Divi navigation. First, we'll look into available styling options inside the menu module settings. Next, I'll show you how to change the width of the drop-down menu, how to force the links to be full width, and how to style the text, how to add hover effect, how to round the corners of your submenu. We'll also go over changing or removing a default shadow behind the submenu. I will show you how to add a little triangle arrow at the top of the submenu, how to position the drop-down container in the center directly below the first menu item, and also how to change the animation. Basically, all the things I could think of which you may want to change about your submenus. There is a lot to cover, so let's get to work. This is a sample menu module. And first I would like to see and show you what are the default module settings we can apply to our submenus. So I already changed the menu text color links, logo size, added a background and some padding, and that is it. For the drop-down menu, here in the Design tab, drop-down menu section, we can basically manage the colors. So the menu background, menu line color, which is that top border here, text color for our links, the default and the hover state, right? And lastly, drop down menu active link color. Active link indicates if the submenu item is the currently viewed URL. The last two settings here in that section apply to the mobile menu. And one last element we can change about our drop-down is the animation. So here in the animation section, we can change drop-down menu animation to a different one. We have 4 to choose from, so you can edit that here, but let's leave the default fade for now. So as you see, using the menu module settings, we can basically only manage the colors and the animation of the drop-down menus. So if you do not want any additional plugins for your navigation, the only way to change the appearance of the submenu is with CSS. Now, I included all the CSS I mentioned in my blog post, and you can simply copy and paste the part of the code you need to achieve a certain thing. And by watching the video, you should learn how to combine the CSS to apply all the different customizations you want to use together. So one thing you may want to do is change the width of your submenu. Right here, we can see that this wedding photography link drops to the second line, and so is this one. If the menu drop-down would be wider, that text could fit in one line. So you may have the idea to go into the Advanced tab, Custom CSS section, and here we have a separate box for a drop-down menu container. So if I would like to change the width, I may go here and add width of, let's say, 320 pixels. Right now that made the submenu wider, but the link inside is still narrower. Okay, we could target drop-down menu links with min width 100%, for example, but that doesn't help because in between the container and the link itself, there is a list item. The container is the unordered list, and there are list items, and inside are our links. So using this custom CSS section here in the module settings won't be enough. We have to be able to define our own CSS selectors to target different parts of that submenu separately. And to do that, I would always recommend using a custom CSS class. So here I added a CSS class of DL menu. Now let's go to the front end to see how we can target that. We'll use the browser inspector to do that. Inspect, I can select my menu and see how I can target that submenu section. So to show that submenu in the inspector, we could try like clicking that icon here, but this doesn't always work. Sometimes it will redirect you to a different page. So to make sure that your drop-down menu is visible, you can force the hover state on that list item. So here I'm selecting the Lee, and here we can force the hover state on this. We can go one step further and force the hover state here for that link or a list item, and that shows us the second level links. Okay, now to change the width of the submenu. As I mentioned, this is unordered list with list items, right? And it has a CSS class of submenu. But first, let's open the computed section. It shows me that this is 240 pixels wide right now. So to target that UL, I could use a simple selector such as UL class submenu, right? But I do want to make sure that I'm only targeting that particular menu module. So I do want to use my DL menu class, which I've added to the menu module. So all the way up here we have that parent container ETPB module with a class DL menu. So I can use that class as a parent of my submenu element, right? So here DL menu UL submenu, and let's define our width 320 pixels, for example. That's probably too much. Okay, 300 pixels. And now let's also target our list items inside. So each list item, let's say that it should be as wide as the menu item, right? It still doesn't fix this because our links, so here you see that's the UL, the container. Our list item is 100%, but the link inside is still narrower, and that's because it also has a fixed width set. So we have to change that width. It has a width of 200 pixels. So if we target links inside that list item as well with 100%, DL menu, UL submenu, Li A. Now they match the width of the container. The problem is with that offset here. So second level drop-down would overlap. And so to fix that, let me just change that menu structure so we can see both versions with the drop-down menu going to the right and also to the left. But first, I will copy the CSS I already wrote and place that into my style sheet here I have opened. It's just a code editor I use to connect to my child theme style sheet. You can place that code in your theme options or page settings CSS just as well. Okay, so now with a slightly different structure, we can see that second level drop down going either right or left. Now what controls that is the right and left position. So once again, let me open that here. So by default, that submenu container is offsetted from the left by the width of the submenu, and the default width is 240 pixels. So we need to change that left property to our 300. Now the selector that's used here is just a simple nav, list item, UL inside list item. So we can use the same, but once it's inside the DL menu. The class nav is actually a class on that main UL with our navigation, right? That's still not our menu module. The menu module is this bigger container. The nav is just that unordered list, the top level list with our navigation. So if that would go inside our DL menu, we could change the width to 300 pixels. Sorry, not width, but left property. Okay, so that works good. And now for that version, we want to make sure that this goes to the right. Okay, now we overwritten the default style that says left auto. So this would be the selector we want to use for that second version. That's what Divi is using, where when the list item has that class that's applied probably dynamically, it has left auto, and right offset is changed to that pixel value. But here we want to make sure that we also are targeting just our DL menu. Okay, so let me just copy that CSS for a moment, place that here. I can close that, refresh my page, and now our submenu is wider and it works correctly both ways. Okay, but as you see, the links are like in this container that changes the background. What I like to do is kind of force that links to be full width, because there's that unnecessary space here. So I would like to remove that padding. And let's say I would like to do that without changing the width. So I will comment out that part of CSS, and we will only focus on changing the padding here inside that UL. So right now everything is back as it was, and let me show you how to force that links to be full width regardless of your submenu width. What we have to remove is the padding from the list item, right? It has right and left padding. So simply our DL menu class nav, so our navigation inside the menu module, and then second level list items. So li padding 0, min width 100%, so that stretches the list item. But similar, when we change the width, our links have set pixel value for the width. We can change that as well. So not only our list items, but links inside would have min width of 100%. And now they are stretched across the full submenu width. So just two simple selectors setting the width of our list items and links inside that list item to 100%. Now we can use this selector which targets links inside the second level list item. So here is our first level list item. This is the second level list item, and a link is inside, right? So that's our A selector. We can use that to change the font styling, the font style. So I used uppercase for the first level links, but for the dropdown I don't want that uppercase style. So text transform, none. We could change the font weight, font family, basically apply any font styling to it. Now let's look into the hover state. So by default, Divi adds that semi-transparent light gray overlay behind your drop-down links. So we could choose our own color or just remove it. The text color, hover color, can be changed in the menu module, as I showed you, but not the background, right? So we could also target these links on hover and change that background color. So that selector, but when we are hovering over the link, we can say background. Let's try with this one. It may not be noticeable, but Divi also changes the opacity of that link on hover. So we would want to also change the opacity to 1. We can also move it a little bit. What I like to do is add some padding to the left side. So padding left. There is a default padding, I think, of around 20 pixels. So let's try with 25 pixels. It moves slightly to the side, but abruptly. We do need a CSS transition to have a nicer movement. So back here, the transition property needs to go to the default state, not just the hover, but here transition all 3 second is in out, for example. And we can increase that. I think default is 20, so 28. Now with that type of menu, you may want to remove the top and bottom padding here, right? So there's no this additional space here, and maybe even remove that border. So let's see how we can do that. We have to target our submenu, and it has top border and top and bottom padding 20 pixels. So our UL submenu, when it's in the DL menu CSS class, let's say padding 0, border top 0. I think the padding didn't work, and let's see why is that. So here on that computed section, we can see padding top. And here we can see what selector, what CSS is actually working. So that selector is more specific than what I wrote. It uses 2 CSS classes and 2 elements. So I could make my selector more specific. Let's see, let's use actually these 2 classes as well. So the ETPB menu is a CSS class on my module, so that would have, I would use both DL menu and ETPB menu, and the ET menu nav is a class for our navigation container. My selector is somewhere here. Let's find, or let's just go here. So that's how I wanted to remove that padding, but here I can add these additional classes. So 2 classes for the main container, 1 class from inside the navigation container, and then my UL with a submenu. So that's more specific. That's why my padding top and bottom now works. What I don't like here is how that submenu items align with that top level link. I think it would be nicer if that would form a nice line here, and we could fix that by changing the padding here on that link, or, and that option I would like better, move that first submenu slightly to the left. Okay, so let's see here. Now that list item has a padding left of 11 pixels, and my link here has a left padding of 20 pixels. So that's why there's 9 pixel space here. And to fix that, we can use transform property on our submenu, but I only want to move that first submenu. I do not want to move that one, just that first one. So we have to target the first level lease inside our unordered list, and then only the first submenus in there. We can use the right caret symbol to do so. So my selector would look like this: DL menu as my parent container, and then UL with a class nav, first level li, which would be the parent li, right? And then inside first UL and nothing else. Transform, translate X, -9 pixels. Lovely. So now this nicely aligns with that top level link. Okay, so what if I would like to change that border radius of my submenu? It could be as simple as I have that is my submenu selector, as adding a border radius. Let's try with 10 pixels. And it works well. The problem is if I hover, now my links aren't rounded here on the side. So that could be fixed by adding overflow hidden on the container, but then we wouldn't see the second level list items. So to fix that, we have to make sure that first link has top right and top left border radius, and the last link has bottom left and right border radius. So let's try to define our selector, maybe here. So DL submenu, UL submenu, li, first child, A, because the background is on a link. So any link inside the first child of our submenu would have border radius, and starting from the top left corner we can say 10 pixel, 10 pixel, 0, 0. And the same would go apply to the last child, but border radius would start with 0, 0, and then 10 and 10 at the bottom. Okay, so let's see how that looks now. Much better, right? Okay, so next we could also edit the box shadow. There is that slight shadow behind our submenu. We could use a different one, basically. So that's very simple. Let's see what is the current box shadow. Let's see here. So that's the box shadow value used by the submenu by default, and we can define our own. Here my submenu could use a box shadow, let's say 0 horizontal offset, 10 pixel vertical offset. Next we have blur radius, so let's try with a bigger shadow, like 30 pixel. Spread, we can, that's not a necessary value, but we can use negative spread, something like that. And lastly, our color, so RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.5, that would be semi-transparent black, maybe a bit lighter, something like that. Okay, so that looks nice. Now, one other thing I would like to show you is how to add a little triangle here at the top, but for that I would like to change my submenu color in the Divi Menu module settings first. I will copy my CSS to my style sheet so I don't lose what I already have here. And now in the drop-down settings, I would go to the drop-down. Let's change the menu background color to black and text to white, also on hover. Okay, let's try to save that. And now here the color change works. Most of my CSS worked, but the transition doesn't work here on my links. So let's see what is overwriting it. So my link here, you see when changing the links color for the drop-down, Builder also generates a new transition for the color property, and it uses a selector with 2 classes and 3 different elements, while my selector for transition is using only 2 classes and 3 selectors. So I do need to be a bit more specific here. If I would edit that and add a additional CSS class like ET_PB module, ET_PB menu, that works for the text transformation. And let's see the transition. Okay, lovely. So now the little triangle here at the top. So this is a little CSS triangle generator I like to use. We can select what type of arrow we would like to have. So for us that would be top arrow, and let's make it a bit smaller. So I think 20 pixels and maybe 10 pixels height and black. Okay, and now I can copy that CSS here. It basically creates an arrow just with the border color settings. So it's pretty neat. And we can apply that CSS to a pseudo element we can add to our drop-down menu. So that submenu right here, that's in my style sheet. So let me add a new selector, the same as this, but with a B4 pseudo class. So B4, and now here we need content empty, so open and closing quote symbol, display block, and rest would be that part of CSS. So going in here, we can place that like this, but as you see right now, it is right there, not visible because it's a kind of inside of the container. We have to position it absolutely. So we also need position, absolute, top negative 10 pixels, and left whatever works for us. So something like 30 pixel may look good. That wasn't the selector I wanted to use, so that would need to be UL nav first level li first level UL submenu, like this. Now it only affects that first submenu. Another thing you may want to do with your submenu is to position it in the center vertically underneath your menu link. And it also can be done fairly easy by targeting that first level submenu, because that's the only one we want to target, right? The second level submenus are in the correct place, but that submenu we can transform and translate it similarly to how we moved it 9 pixels to align the links with each other. We can transform it by the half of its width. So transform translate X 50%, negative 50%. And that moves it by half of its width, but the starting point is here at the edge of that link because the left position is set to 0. So we have to change that starting point to left 50%. That would be the 50% of the parent container. And now the starting position is somewhere here in the middle of that services link. And then we are translating it by the half its width to the side. So now it's directly underneath the parent link. If our submenu is centered, we may want to move that triangle as well. So here we would approach this very similarly. The left position would be 50%, but we have to transform it to the side by half its width. So translate X, negative 50% works, or just negative 10 pixels would also work. Okay, so one more thing you may want to do here when your submenu is centered like this is to change the alignment of links, right? So it's as easy as changing the text alignment, either on a list item or on a link itself. So just targeting links inside submenu, which are inside DL menu, text align center. And now that works for all submenu links. One last thing I would want to show you is how to animate it slightly on hover, so it kind of slides in from the bottom, not only fades in, but fades and moves to the top. So to do that, we have to change the initial position of our submenu, right? And we are already doing that with the transform property here to make it, to move it to the center. So in addition to translate X, I would also translate it through the vertical axis, right? So translate Y. And this could be just 10 pixels, for example. It moves it to the bottom. We could just simply use translate property. It would look like this: translate, negative 50%, and then 10 pixels. So translate accepts first translate X and then translate Y. If you're not moving it to the center, you would just use translate Y 10 pixels, and then on hover, so when our parent link is being hovered over, so basically when that submenu becomes visible, we can change that transformation to 0 pixels Y, like translate Y would be 0. And now that menu slides in on hover. I would also change the transition property here to make it a bit slower. So let's try to define our own transition. So here, transition all 0.3 second is in, out. Okay, let's see. And now it's a bit slower and looks pretty good. Now, to show you one additional important thing, I duplicated our menu, and for that second one I will remove the logo image here. And now the navigation, the sub menu is very close to our menu items. So to fix that, you may think that adding a padding to that menu container in the design spacing. Let's say we'll add top and bottom padding to match the size of the first one, but the submenu is still very close to the menu item. So let me show you how we can fix that. The position of the submenu is based on the size of the link, each menu item here. And if we inspect the page, we can see that this is the size of a link when we use a logo image, and this is the size of a link if we not. So to fix that, we really only need to change the size of that link, the padding here, because trying to move this drop-down menu to the bottom could cause this gap between the menu item and the submenu. When you hover over the gap, the submenu would disappear. So instead of trying to move the drop-down, we will just increase the size of our link. Okay, so let's see what is currently adding and defining that padding. We can see that the padding bottom is 8 pixels, but here in the computed section we can find the correct selector. It's actually over here, but anytime you want to find a specific value, you can look through here, and this will show you the CSS that affects that CSS property. So here we can see that this is the selector that Divi is using to change that bottom padding. It actually uses a class of ETPB menu without logo. So this is a CSS class which is added to our main module container if there is no logo. So we should be able to use the same selector but with additional DL menu class. So here at the beginning, no space, because the next class, ETPB menu without logo, is a class on the same container. So two classes together without a space. And now we can change the padding bottom to 15 pixels, for example. And that moves our submenu, creating this space between top level links and the drop-down. And that would be all. I know it was quite a lot, but I hope it was helpful and gives you some ideas on how you can change the look and feel of your navigation. Do let me know in the comments what you think. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with, so feel free to share your beautiful new submenus with us. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.